Hello, this is Jacob Rosenblatt, Applications Engineer at Safety Power Inc. In this video, we will discuss the recently adopted ruling by New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, otherwise known as New York State DEC. The ruling is the 6 NYCRR Part 333, which is aimed at limiting emissions from distributed generation sources in New York State. We will discuss what economic dispatch sources are, the advantages of participating in demand response programs, the emissions limits set forth by the New York State DEC, and also some important deadlines. Conventional power stations, such as coal-fired, gas, and nuclear-powered plants, are centralized and often require electricity to be transmitted over long distances. By contrast, distributed generation, or DG systems, are decentralized and are located close to the load they serve, and thus reduce reliance on the electric grid. DG systems can also be used to supply electricity to the grid for financial incentives. The New York State DEC defines any stationary reciprocating or rotary internal combustion engine that produces electricity for the electric grid or for use in its host facility as a DG source. This also includes emergency power generators. DG sources can participate in demand response or DR programs, which provide financial incentives to consumers who limit usage during peak hours. The New York State DEC defines an economic dispatch source as any DG source participating in a demand response program, or as a DG source used to ensure reliable electricity supply for a facility or reduce energy costs, which can be done in the form of selling electricity to the electric grid or simply by using your generator during peak hours. Essentially, any DG source, which is not strictly used for emergency power generation, is considered an economic dispatch source. Emergency generators are not subject to the emission standards of this new ruling, but are very strictly defined and limited in terms of their usage and even what time they can be used. Initially, the DR program was meant as a temporary fix to capacity shortfalls in New York State. Now, demand response has a significant role in protecting electric system integrity and is part of government reform plans. Demand response sources reduce the chance of blackouts in New York State, which could lead to grave public health consequences and losses of over $1 billion in economic output per day. The New York Independent Systems Operator, otherwise known as NYISO, is the authority placed in charge of managing New York's electric grid. In 2011, they estimated the capacity of DG sources in New York demand response program at 104 megawatts. This is in the city alone. In 2014, that number grew to 359 megawatts. It was estimated further that the potential capacity of all DG sources in the city is 1,320 megawatts. Now, if all these generators participated in the DR program without emission regulations, NOx emissions could be as high as 127 tons a day. There is also an estimated 15,000 engines participating in New York State's DG program. Most of these are unregulated. If left unchecked, this will have grave public health impacts and make it very difficult for New York to meet its emission obligations under the Clean Air Act. It is exactly for this reason that New York State DEC is adopting the new regulation 6 NYCRR Part 333 in an effort to reduce NOx and particulate matter emission. This rule has been in effect since December 1, 2016 and applies to any generator considered as an economic dispatch source, as defined earlier in this presentation. The ruling will also impose stricter monitoring, testing, and record-keeping standards for all DG sources in New York State. The table below summarizes the emission limits for natural gas and diesel engines. As you can see, the NOx limitation for natural gas engines is set at 1.5 grams per brake horsepower hour and at 2.3 for diesel engines. Particulate matter is limited at 0.3 grams per brake horsepower hour or at an 85% reduction in emissions. Annual tune-ups will also be mandatory for all engines. The aggressive NOx and particulate matter emissions will require the use of an SCR emission control system and diesel particulate matter filters in order for DG sources to continue to be allowed to operate. Many agglomerates and other owners of DG sources have already been taking advantage of the price incentives set forth by demand response programs. Even with the added investment in emission control systems, New York State's demand response programs still remain a great way to increase your income and reduce costs of power. Another important advantage of participating in a DR program is the flexibility of using your engine when needed. Economic dispatch sources can run during peak hours to reduce costs. They can also be used for peak load generation, base load generation, and even storm avoidance, which emergency generators cannot be used for. Here are some important dates set forth by the New York State DEC. These are the most up-to-date dates as per now. Engine owners who wish to participate as an economic dispatch source must have notified the New York State DEC prior to January 2nd, 2017. If an economic dispatch source failed to do so and had already been considered one, it will be considered as part of the program by default. Prior to April 30th, 2017, an emissions test must be conducted on your economic dispatch source and submitted to the New York State DEC. May 1st, 2017 marks the deadline for complying with the emissions limits set forth in section 333.4 of the regulation. There are certain conditions under which the deadline may be further extended until May 2018 and even until May 2019. I hope you have found this video helpful and informative. For more information on deadlines, emissions limitations, and emission control systems, you can visit the Safety Power website or contact one of our sales engineers. Thank you for watching.